Welcome to Midwest Architecture and Design. My name is Jordan Powers. I'm an architectural photographer based in Minnesota, photographing projects across the Midwest for architects, designers, and builders. And today I'm talking with Quinn Hutson and Brooke Jacobson of CNH Architects. Now, for those of you who've been following along, this is my first interview with a commercial architecture firm. And some of you may or may not know, but I've been photographing the built environment for the last 10 years or so. But it's been primarily residential architecture that I've been photographing. Now, I have done some commercial work sprinkled in these last 10 years, but it wasn't until the last year or so that I started working directly with commercial architects. And just recently, I started working with CNH Architects on a couple of their projects. So I actually wanted to sit down and learn a little bit about, obviously a little bit about CNH Architects themselves, about their background, where they're going, and a little bit about their firm. But I also wanted to maybe understand a little bit more of the differences between commercial and residential architecture. Now, there's obviously the aesthetic differences and the differences in function, but some of the things that I hadn't considered before were all the different hoops that a commercial architect needs to jump through versus a residential architect, depending on the entity they're working with. Because keep in mind, they're working with private businesses, office spaces, municipal entities, and a lot of the different things that they might have to jump through to get those accomplished are going to be a little bit different. So now keep in mind, the whole purpose of this podcast is I want to sit down with architects and designers and learn a little bit more about the built environment, about their role and what they do. So I'm still learning how to have intelligent conversations about architecture. So forgive me if some of the questions that I ask are a little bit clunky. I'm still trying to learn how to articulate myself when I'm talking about architecture. So hopefully you'll get the gist of what I'm trying to ask and the answers that they give. Now, one last thing before we hop in, I just wanted to make sure that for those of you who are just listening to this on audio, I just want to make sure that you know that you can watch this online at midwestarchdesign.com. That's ARCH design.com. And if you're somebody who's watching this on YouTube or at midwestarchdesign.com, I just want to make sure you know that you can listen to this in passing in your car, on your commute, anywhere you listen to podcasts. So just search Midwest Architecture and Design. You should be able to find it pretty easily. Now, if you want to follow CNH Architects online, you can do so on Instagram at CNH Architects. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, you can do so at Jordan Powers without the vowels. In the meantime, enjoy this episode with CNH Architects. All right. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for joining me. I already told everybody about you and what we're going to be talking about in the future, in the past, or so. Let's just kind of dive in. So, CNH Architects, backstory. Let's start there. I like starting there because it gives us a takeoff point.
Absolutely. Well, just to let you know, CNH Architects has been around for quite a while. We just celebrated our 50th anniversary 2 years ago now as a corporation. And we've really grown slowly, which was over those many years, but that's kind of where we've been at, and really like the size we're at. We've had a variety of different project types over the years, grown into different specialties, and kind of just seeing where those opportunities bring us over those years.
How many people do you have working for the firm?
We have 13. We're architectural and interior design only. So,
okay.
We consult out for engineers of all types, and bring, the right people in. But internally, we've got 13 employees, and
okay.
Good size for us.
And it's primarily commercial and we'll get into that, but
yeah, sure.
No, not any residential.
No residential.
Right. Okay.
Right. Absolutely.
So how about yourself, Brooke? So how long have you been? You obviously haven't been here for the last 50 years.
Thank you for calling attention to that. I've been with the firm since about 2005.
Okay.
So, and then I've been either an associate or principal involved in leadership since I think 2013.
Okay. So this is the first interview I've done with a commercial firm. So I have a lot to learn in this interview, so no pressure, but I'm going to be trying to pull a lot out of you. So I've primarily been photographing the residential space. I actually started in commercial, but I'm down in Mankato area. There's not a lot of commercial architecture. There's a few firms. I've done some work for ISG and some others, but primarily residential is where a lot of my focus is in. But I'm trying to do more commercial work. So it's a whole different experience for me as a photographer. Obviously, not just the buildings and the spaces that I'm photographing, but I'm understanding more and more the more commercial work that I do that's a completely different beast.
Yeah, and we find that too.
Yeah.
Years ago, we would do some infill when residential, potential clients call us and we said, okay, yeah, we could maybe fit that in and make some sense. And then we realized after a while that it's just so different that, we weren't addressing it in the way we would, you can't address it the same way you do commercial. And it just wasn't a good fit. So yeah, commercial is very different. We see that with contractors as well. In fact, anytime we get a residential contractor trying to do a small commercial project, we definitely want to have a discussion about what's different, so that everyone's going in eyes open so they know that it is a different process.
And I know every project's going to be different, but typically where is it? Well, actually, before we get into there, you do many different types of commercial, different, government agencies, organizations. I guess, was there a decision that kind of led in the past 50 years that kind of led that direction, or is that where you started from? And
we started more on the commercial, non-public market, and then it was somewhat conscious. I mean, you had to have the right opportunity to expand upon the public work, but it was a conscious decision to work in that. And now we're depend on the year, but just say 50% municipal public associated would be city, county, state work, and 50% commercial projects. But it was conscious, and definitely benefits of having that diversity.
Okay, Brooke, did you initially when you came in? I mean, when you went to school for architecture, were you leaning more towards the commercial side of things, or was it?
Yeah.
What was your
career
path? Most
people, when they go to school, they're aiming towards the commercial realm because you don't need actually an architect to do residential, just in the built environment in general. So there's very few.
You don't need that's not a requirement, you mean?
No, back when I was going to school, the percentage was less than 1% of architects actually do residential design. Everybody else is in the commercial realm. So.
And for those clients out there listening, I certainly encourage architectural design in residential. There's a lot of benefits, in getting things that are really well designed for you. But it's not
you don't have to be a licensed architect.
Whereas in the commercial space, it does require that a commercial. Okay,
correct.
That's interesting. That's one thing I did not know. Okay, so I mean, I assume
most people don't.
Yeah,
most people think architect and they think we do homes and all that, but most don't.
Yeah, I assumed that, you could just be, well, I guess, does it depend on the size, or, because, there's just regular builders that might do, small little shopping centers or little plazas, right? Or does that still require?
It's probably more limited than you'd think.
Really?
There's small amounts, there is a size, and it's a state code issue of what that threshold is at which an architect needs to be involved in designing and certifying the project designs. But they're really small. You could do a small tenant remodel, and top of my head, maybe it's 3,000 feet or something. But you can do something small. You can go in and do finishes, recarpet or things like that without an architect involved. But after that, it is a state requirement. So
there's this, I think it's funny, but it's probably very cliche. I have this joke in my head where people think of architects as just sitting around and drawing pictures of houses and buildings all day. Obviously in the commercial world, it's a lot different. Now, you said 13 people? 13 people working for the firm. What all are the responsibilities of the people? Obviously you have the architects. What other responsibilities do you do as a firm? Because you're obviously juggling multiple projects at a time. You have different people designing different projects. Right. So how does that work as a larger? I don't know. Are you a larger firm or are you a smaller firm? 13 architects is just in that very edge of medium size. Okay.
Although there are a very large number of 1 to 5 person firms out there, but then there's the 90, 150,
Wow.
200-person firms too, within the state. But at 13, we're just on that kind of that threshold on the small to medium size. You start getting 40 or more, then you usually start including engineering within the firm, because there's enough to keep that going. For us, there's not always enough. If projects are in early phases, we don't need consulting engineers at that phase of the project, then if we had them in-house, they'd be looking for something to do.
Right.
So like a little feel for the size.
And the good thing about being on kind of that smaller range is that pretty much everyone in our office can work on any aspect of a project at any given time. So they're also involved through a project from start to finish, as long as schedules allow, and things don't start and stop and people get busy. But you're allowed to work on design, work on construction documents, and then work in construction administration and see it all the way through, which doesn't happen a lot when you get into some of the larger firms.
Right. Yeah.
They tend to have you on a category of the project. You do it over and over, and you get probably very efficient.
Yep.
But you also aren't bringing that experience of the whole project in.
Okay.
So it's something that at that medium size we can do. And actually, when we poll our staff, that's an important factor to them, that ability to be able to see projects from start to finish, learn about all the aspects, of how a building goes together or what's important in the design process.
And are you generally working, I mean, it's probably varies per project, but are you generally working on each project kind of as a team? Like, do you have one person that takes the lead on a project and then everybody's kind of involved at some point? Or is it really just going to depend on the project? I know that's a loaded question, but...
Really depends on the project and the size of the project. Okay. So some of the smaller projects, it might be a principal and one other person in the office. Some of our larger projects, when we get into some of our city work, we've developed a public safety team in the office. So we do a lot of fire stations. We'll have multiple people working on that. So you'll kind of have one or two overseeing the broader team that's working on the project.
Okay. That's a good question. So one of the things I did notice about your firm when we first started talking was that you do a lot of fire stations and a lot of so are you known as a firm for, in the residential world, residential architects may be known for a certain style of architecture. Yeah. Is it the same in the commercial world, or is it more type of...
Yeah, not necessarily style. Not that there aren't some really well-known architects that have a very specific style. You think of like Frank Gehry and like
of course.
U of M, Art Museum. For us, we take a very different approach, particularly at our firm, where we're very focused on what is right for the client and what their interests are: traditional, modern, some blend. Depending on the project, our projects turned out a lot very different. Going back to what you started asking about is how did we kind of more in the being known for something, and we're definitely known for our fire station work.
Sure.
We probably have more current active fire station projects than any other architect in Minnesota. To my knowledge, I don't know what everybody has.
Not like keeping a tally.
I have no idea exactly what everybody has going on, but I know that we are at least one of the leading architects in fire station design at this point.
How did that happen? Was just you designed one, they liked it, word spread?
That's absolutely true in the way many things start. We were doing municipal work for quite a while, work for cities, and a little bit of city hall work here, some park and rec, and then we had this opportunity to kind of connect and do a first fire station, and it ended up being a very significantly sized, nationally recognized design award, and all that, and so it really was a great kickoff for that category.
Right.
And we said we really loved doing this. The fire station work was very, very interesting, rewarding. Great people to work with, so we really worked hard to just grow that part of the business focus.
And there's a huge knowledge base when it comes to fire stations that you have to know. So it's not real easy for someone to just jump in. Like, to jump in and do an office building. If you haven't done an office building before, that's a much simpler transition, but there's a huge knowledge base when it comes to fire station.
That's interesting. Okay, now you're triggering some thoughts in my head because with residential, it's generally, you kind of know what you're dealing with each time for the most part, but I hadn't considered that there's so many different, with commercial, there's just different types of, I don't know the language to use just yet. I'm getting there.
Project types.
But there's different, I don't know, like beasts you have to overcome to like get some of those, especially with government work.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about working with private commercial, private like office environment? Like for example, I just photographed a storage facility for you and a daycare.
Yeah.
Two very different businesses.
Yes.
Like what, are there many different, well, I guess those are both private businesses, but if you compare those to working with governments, like what kind of hurdles are you having to?
And for each of our clients, we have to really learn and understand what their business is.
Okay.
And the repeat clients, either individually repeat types, like daycare is one that we, have done a lot in as well. You learn the client, but then you also have the piece to learn about what are all the very specific daycare licensing requirements, some of which are physical building requirements that we need to provide in the building. So I think for us, that diversity keeps it interesting. And it's learning. I can't imagine doing an occupation where I'm not learning something new all the time.
Right,
It's part of the joy of doing it. So whether we're learning about requirements, we're learning about how somebody specifically does things, or just learning and meeting new people. It's just always something that's new in that.
You had mentioned going to school for this, that people generally have the idea of going into commercial because of the 1% thing. I'm curious. I'm guessing you were in school more recent than Quinn.
Than me, yes.
Yeah,
that's fair.
Just a smidge. Yeah.
So I'm curious. Are people still thinking about the art and the creative things, or has it become in the commercial world? Does it become very quickly more academic or technical? Is like the
In school?
I'm talking about like once
profession?
you actually like leave school, go into the profession. Does like
It's all of the above.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it really depends on what your role in each project is, what the project entails. So, I mean, every project has some portion of design to it. Okay. So whether it's a simple building and you're just trying to get the rims to fit together, or it's, you're doing a whole building from scratch and it's the exterior aesthetics along with how the building flows as you walk, inside of the building. But then you need to be knowledgeable about how the building goes together. So the wall systems and all the components of that, how to detail things. So, I mean, there's technical aspects to it, but there's also design aspects. So, and on any given team, some people might focus a little bit more on the technical aspects, depending upon what, how large our team is and what we're doing in the office. But, a lot of us work in all the different aspects at different times.
Got it.
I think there's a transition a bit, too, that happens between school and the field.
Big transition.
Depending on the school, there's different levels of stressing the design aspect of architecture. But in all of them, there's a focus on the artistic, the creative, and that's good. Yeah. And that's a very real part of what we do. But in school, you don't get as much into the detail. You learn a bit about it, but you don't spend as much time in the details you do on the creative. And so when you come,
they sell you on the dream of everything, and then
when you come
reality,
into the reality,
right?
It's real. It's there.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of, I would say the creative side of things is maybe 25-30% of their time. And what is creative artistically or creative in the challenge of finding the right flow and mix and the puzzle pieces of putting things together. That's still creativity, not necessarily just the same different type. Yeah. But that's 25-30%. The other part is doing it so that it is quality and lasting and the detail of code or function or material requirements.
Where does it start? I mean again, I should preface everything that I say with a caveat of every project's obviously different, but like, does it, when a client approaches you, and it seems like most of the clients you have are, you kind of have a specific direction already in mind because you have history doing those projects like fire stations and whatnot. But do you typically start with a design? I mean, you start with a function, obviously, but then does it kind of go right into design, like the appearance of what the public is going to see, and then it goes into the details, or is it going to be?
I think it's soon, but I think we start with the idea of what are the goals and needs.
Project goals is
and that can be specific to the room and function needs to more
wanting
overarching
occupants
goals.
to have good daylighting. It's not a very specific thing, but it's something throughout the building they want to incorporate, or
But then it
like
goes, and then we typically start looking at organization, space, relationships, and then we go into aesthetics. But we don't anyway in our office start generally thinking about what's it look like and then fit the function into it. We start with function, then go to and then it's a back and forth push and pull.
Right.
After that, of course. But
you have to,
they both have to work together, and not everything hits it on the first try. So.
Right. So we're talking in a post-COVID world, and I'm sure the conversations come up quite a bit. I know that it has because I've listened in on some of those conversations. But what are things? This is a big question, obviously, but just kind of where we're at right now. Are you having to already start considering what happened with COVID and how the office, the work environment is changing? A lot of people are working from home now. People who are working in the office, there's like this fear and anxiety of distancing and whatnot. Are you having to like put a lot of consideration into that yet? Or
working with our clients, it has had some impact and changes in what they're looking at and where they're going next. And in fact, we had some projects during COVID where we were working with cities, particularly to provide quick changes to space, to provide more separation for the staff, to public interactions and things like that. But yes, as we go forward, I know it's going to have more and more impact.
Right. I was listening to I can't remember which podcast it was. It was just somebody talking about just the different considerations that are being made now, even like using sensors a lot more for touchless things, as well as different surfaces that are not like antimicrobial. I don't know what the word is, but surfaces that help prevent the spread of germs and whatnot more. Are those things that you've had to start putting a lot of, not necessarily research, but have you had to start pivoting towards things of that in projects? Or
I think there has been some and I think it's still, the story still yet to be written a little bit as to what is the most important. Initial response were a lot of the don't touch.
Right. And
I think even CDC has come out and said, that not that you can't transmit through touch, but that airborne was much more a factor. Right. And so I think we're looking more now, anyway, at this point where our clients are asking about it, they're looking at more of ways to provide more fresh air, to clean that air, and provide ways to, reduce airborne and space and things like that, and separation than they were. But I think we will still also continue to see more and more touchless door entries,
sinks,
plumbing faucets,
toilets,
lights, automatic
lights. The antimicrobial, maybe not so much. The more I've been hearing about that, that's not. it's not that big a deal, and it's not always doing what you're thinking when this is antimicrobial.
Right.
It prevents maybe mold from growing on the item, but it's not necessarily preventing transmission.
Right.
It's protecting the product, not you.
Yeah, and a lot of these things were being talked about when we still thought that it was being spread through like cardboard boxes and groceries and stuff. Which, not to say it wasn't, but I'm just saying it was like so uncertain at the time that I think that was just part of the discussion people were having at that time.
Well, and some things that'll be interesting to see where it goes, I think, is prior to the pandemic, some clients were looking at, decreasing footprint. So putting people closer together in open office areas, having, hotel type desks where you interchangeable, like whoever comes up gets that desk that day. And now with the airbornes and transmissions, do people really need to be further away? Versus, people that are sitting like 3 foot on center, at a computer cubicle. Look, so it'll be interesting to see. When
I was working in corporate, I was in an office environment. It was like a call center type environment. And there was, it was an open floor plan, desks right next to each other. Like, I would actually personally prefer to work in an environment where you have a little bit more privacy, less distraction, less noise. I mean, there's got to be benefits to it, to this type of design consideration as well.
Yeah, I think it was a trend a little trendy aspect to the idea of having smaller desk space. And then the trade-off, that they were doing was providing more collaboration, common space. So if you want to work with somebody on something, there's this the stand-up desk over here. There's that couch area over here. And that kind of. So they were trading off. They weren't always getting always getting smaller. They're just trading it for desk space for common joint use space. I don't know. Maybe that'll go back a little bit.
Yeah, we'll see. Everything's still up in the air again with everybody. With a lot of companies like working from home now. I mean, I don't know. Who knows what the future holds? But I mean, you guys seem to still be keeping busy with everything. Is there like a different consideration you guys are having to take for how you approach projects now, aside from just the COVID things?
I think if there was a category of things that I think are going to be the next, new item for architecture in a real general sense, it's going to be resilience. Meaning, how do you design buildings to be flexible enough to manage changes and challenges to the building's environment? Right. Whether that's sustainability related things, and climate change, or in many ways, COVID was a shock to many ways. It was a shock to business, and buildings had a part of that. What buildings were more resilient to that? Were they thinking about? In other ways. So I think that's going to be kind of one of the new categories of things that we'll be learning more about and seeing how does that impact, and how do we provide better buildings with longer life and longer value. By considering resilience.
Are people leaning away from, have you noticed yet people leaning away from like larger office spaces and reconsidering like what that even looks like? I mean, I'm trying to expand a little bit on that conversation about the office environment, how people can have like cubicles here and then maybe just a separate work environment. Like the co-working space is becoming more and more popular, but the way those are set up, it's kind of designed to have a more like free-flowing work environment versus like just stagnant, exclusive office spaces. Is that?
I think that's going to continue. Yeah. I don't know that it's going to be the majority for sure. Right. But I think that trend's going to continue some more. At least with the experience of working remotely, has kind of built in a certain amount of flexibility in employees' perspective, and I think that the business will be looking to how to address that. Yeah, and it's going to be different for every industry. Yeah, what that means, there will be some that may never come back together at the same fixed office, and they may pick up a couple WeWork spots or whatever. But and then there'll be others that interaction and direct interaction, visual, is important. Internally, we're struggling a little bit to redefine what's the right mix of that for us. So we definitely noticed that some things were very challenging to do virtual in the architectural world. Some things were impossible. You can't go and do a site inspection remotely.
Right.
But or look at material selection choices. Seeing something on a computer screen versus seeing and touching is not the same.
Right.
Well, and you're looking at different computer screens that show colorways different. Like I learned that on a project last summer, is somebody had thought the exterior building was a slightly different color than it was.
That's a huge challenge for photographers as well. Like when you're dealing with color, because everybody's looking at different.
Every screen is different.
Every screen's different. Every environment.
My 3 screens on my desk, all completely different.
Yeah. So as a photographer, like one of the other things that we're not considering is a lot of these monitors are. They have like ambient light detection, so they'll adjust the white balance based on that. So even in this room, if we go in this room versus inside the office where there's no windows right there, your screen's going to adjust. So it's been a challenge as a photographer trying to explain to people, this, keep in mind, this color is going to change a little bit depending on the room you're viewing. I can imagine it's challenging in the architecture space as well.
Yeah. Yes, so you have that challenge too. Not only in the color side, but clearly you're not going to do a shoot from home.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Well, actually, interesting. Well, no, I haven't. But there was 2 well-known architecture photographers who did a personal project during COVID where it was all residential, but they had people from all over the world take they basically directed people across the world to adjust their screen and do staging virtually, and they basically did this project where they did like 50 homes all across the world just with people's webcams. Okay. And it was actually a really interesting project. It's worth maybe looking at. If anybody's interested, I'll link to it. But it was just, you have to learn to adjust and pivot when, pandemics and the like happens, and the work environment changes. Is there any particular, I don't want to say is there anything you want the public to know necessarily, but like maybe about your firm, what you have coming up in the future, what direction you're heading with things. What does the future look like for CNH?
Yeah. I think that we're, some of our business goals are to continue developing and maintaining good diversity of project types. And we really, not only is that enjoyable, but it certainly, as a business, it provides a little more stability. Architecture, like anything in the construction world, can be very susceptible to economic conditions. Mm-hmm. And not that we can insulate ourselves totally from that, but the diversity certainly has a very positive impact on that. Mm-hmm. But we enjoy it as a staff as well, to really working with different types. Maybe some small amount of growth in the company as well as we look forward. We're developing, our staff and providing, more individual expertise and knowledge within it to always, and that's always an ongoing process with any company, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. But
yeah, well, and Brooke, actually, I should have asked you a little while ago. You're the first female architect that I've spoken with in this podcast. And you're also a principal.
Yeah.
So is that, again, being somebody who's somewhat still ignorant to the industry, is that pretty unique?
I don't know if it's unique. It's not super common.
Yeah.
And up until the last few years.
Maybe that's a better way to put it. Is that common?
Because, there are many women out there in leadership positions. It's just a small percentage when in the architecture industry. So, when I go to the AIA convention in the fall, I'm still, there's still a lot of the, older white male that's there and represented as part of the industry. And it's interesting because in school, women have actually overtaken men in percentages for architecture school, but you don't see that as much when you get out in the field. And we have a lot of factors, women start getting married, having children, having to take some time off. Right. It's not an easy career to just jump right back in the saddle.
Yeah, things are always changing.
Things are always changing. You always have to be on top of everything and learning, and sometimes priorities shift, especially when you get into some of the larger firms. They expect a lot of time out of you.
Right.
And if you start to have a family, then your priorities start to shift and you're not able to give of that time. And so then sometimes it's harder to move up the ladder and get into some of those leadership positions. Yeah. So I will say
it took 15 years you've been here?
Been here, almost 16 years.
16 years. So when did you become a principal?
Principal was a year ago, or a little over a year ago, and it became an associate 2013.
Okay.
So, which is the first step in leadership for us.
Right.
But that is a unique aspect, at least for us. 9 of our 13 employees are female.
Yeah.
So we're definitely in the midst of that transition.
At all.
Yeah.
I mean, that is unique, I would say, in our industry.
Yeah. This is definitely not a conversation that we could talk all day about it, but I'm curious about how challenging it has been for you as a female. I don't really know how to ask that. Maybe I'll just straight up ask it. Sure. Has it been challenging as a female architect over your career? And I know that we're sitting in front of Quinn right now, but I mean, has it been challenging from your perspective to grow into these leadership roles?
I will say yes and no. I'm very fortunate to have been at CNH for as long as I have, especially talking to cohorts around the Twin Cities. As a female, it was not a hard jump to get into leadership here. And I think we're, as a firm, very supportive of women. Like Quinn said, we have 9 female out of 13 people in the office. And so it's not something that really plays a factor. Right. So that's fortunate. And so that's where, I haven't had any issues. The more issues are dealing with men in the industry. So construction. So, I mean, we're architects and we deal with clients and all that. And for the most part, I've never had any issues. It's when I go to a job site and I'm completely surrounded by men, and how, if Quinn and I both go to a site, they will speak to him differently than speak to me, or just not speak to me. So so it's dealing with that side of it.
Yeah. That could be. I can see that being really challenging, and I would have never considered that. But that's good to know. That's good. I'm glad you shared that. Again, this could be a really long conversation. So put a little button on it right there. Something for men to consider, especially if you're in the construction world. There you go. Well, I appreciate taking the time. I know this wasn't we didn't uncover anything profound, but I wanted to learn more about your firm, where you're coming from, where you're heading. And just learn a little bit more about commercial architecture in general. So I appreciate the insight you're able to give me. Is there any last thoughts you wanted to share with anybody about anything about your firm, or anything you want people to know? Are you hiring, or do you want people to?
We just filled our most recent position, so we're good there. Well, I think it's just I've really enjoyed and continue to enjoy every day, and the challenges of it. But I really like architecture, working with people, developing something that helps them, do their job better, do their business, enjoy their time at work, but do it in a way that you can physically see it afterwards. That's one of my favorite parts of being an architect, is that you can see what you created for them, and for but it's very physical. Yeah, enjoy that part. It's been fun talking. So
I appreciate the time. Thank you so much for time. I know you've got a meeting to get to, so I'll let you both get on with your day. Thank you so much for listening to Midwest Architecture and Design. If you're an architect, designer, or builder and would like to collaborate on a project together and be interviewed on this podcast, please reach out to me at jordanpowers.com. Now, if you'd like to help keep me motivated to continue making these, just knowing that you found this worth watching or listening to is reason enough. So please do me a favor and subscribe wherever you're listening to this or watching, so that I know what kind of reach this is getting. Also, if you're listening to the audio-only version of this, you can watch the episode for free at midwestarchdesign.com. And be sure to follow me on Instagram at jordanpowers without the vowels.